Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thanks for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Senator Richard Onyonka on my far right is the senator representing the county of Kisii. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Thank you for your time.
I'm happy to see you. Thanks for welcoming me again.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Next to him is Joshua Nyamore. He's an advocate of the High Court. Good morning.
Thank you, Ayub.
Lovely having you.
I'm privileged to join you.
A pleasure for granting us your company on the broadcast. And Wakili Hilary Sigei represents the county of Bomet. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub, and thank you for having me this morning.
Asante. Dr. Martin Olo, Associate Dean, Daystar University School of Law, will be joining us here on the broadcast shortly as we discuss the state of the broad-based arrangement. But first, gentlemen, we begin with a look at the front pages of the dailies. The Standard says repressive regime, and this is in relation to a report by the United Nations, which was tabled during the Council's 49th session in Geneva between 28th of April and May 9th, 2025, which details dramatic surge in abductions, torture and killings of activists, medical professionals, lawyers and journalists, especially during the Gen Z-led protest against the controversial Finance Bill 2024. It also dates back to some of the other reports by the United Nations, including the watchdog reports during the Grand Coalition government in the aftermath of the 2007-8 post-election violence, which left more than 1,300 Kenyans dead, as well as the Rivayala story and how civil society expressed concern about the TJRC report, which was never implemented, and bodies that were dumped in Rivayala, and the lack of attention from authorities to investigate all those cases spanning across 3 successive administrations. Senator Richard Onyonka, first to you. It's concerning, isn't it, even for the state of Kenya's standing among the community of nations, given the catalogue of human rights violations?
When you look at this report, the truth is, the answer is yes. The way I look at it is that we've got this, what I call the historical bad habits. And the report basically goes back to President Kibaki's time, and you come back to Uhuru's time with President Ruto, and obviously you have the issues coming up under the current administration because of the abductions, extrajudicial killings and all that. My honest and sincere hope and prayer is that some of these things, it has reached a time now we must decide whether we're going to fix them once and for all, make sure we have restorative justice, make sure that there is compensation given out to all these people who have been violated, make sure we identify them, and make sure that we give their families closure. The truth is, it's the big elephant in the room for our country. There are 2 things that are now coming out. One is corruption, of course, which is number 1. The second issue is violation of human rights. And for me, it's a sad state, because I believe that when you look at the early 90s coming on, particularly when you look at President Moi's regime, in fact, the analysis that has historically been given is that President Moi's regime was a bad regime because there were violations of human rights, and all these issues were considered to have been President Moi's Achilles heel. My point is, all our administrations have actually had these issues. The reason why in the 60s and 70s there was a need, and why you have all these groups of, even in Parliament, the Seven Sisters, the Orengos, the Mukisa Kituis and all that, if you look at their reports, they were always talking about violation of human rights.
Okay.
When you come to President Kibaki's administration, which nobody seriously zeroed in and looked at whether that was the case, if you look at the report, is where it comes out. All these administrations have had these issues, and my honest and sincere feeling is that we now need to be honest with ourselves. We now need to agree, if possible. I've always mentioned this elsewhere, and I've said, let's have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that we can successfully look at the names, the people, the individuals, the families that have been affected, and how these crimes took place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So I am actually very happy that President William Ruto has pronounced himself that he is no longer going to be party to abductions. At least the impression I get is that he has owned up. And I hope that in his owning up, he will take responsibility. And in the process of taking responsibility, we'll have restorative justice so that we can then compensate the people and the families that have been violated, so that at least some of these families can have closure.
And Joshua, the senator talks about how relevant the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission was, but its recommendation were ignored by the Kenyatta administration. I mean, isn't this not an open embrace and a continuity in human rights violations in our country?
Yeah, Ayub, human rights is, I speak about it passionately because not only as a lawyer, but I've been an activist on human rights issues. I'm actually in class even now as a student of human rights law. And you know, human rights, as the Senate is saying, has been a big issue in this country from our historical days, right from the colonial days. And then, you know, we inherited what I would refer to as colonial systems that, you know, have endured through the regimes. But there is something that it is important to note about this report. It basically reveals how Kenya is being open about, you know, systems and incidences of human rights abuse. You know, we have, for the first time, a president that has actually come out in public and accepted that we have a human rights problem. And you know, he has made firm commitments. The president spoke about it even yesterday and said that we have a human rights problem in this country, and it is not going to be business as usual. The president has, you know, committed to take action. But beyond that, the president has, there are certain things that the president has done. For instance, one big thing that this president has done in the last few months, actually weeks, is the appointment of Professor Makau Mutua as an advisor on human rights issues. Professor Mutua is a respected human rights scholar globally, but especially in Africa. This is also the government that has appointed, you know, a minister in charge of, you know, justice and human rights issues. Pareno, I mean a PS, Pareno, apart from the fact that we have a new Attorney General who has, you know, been a very professional lady. And so we also see that there are cases coming to court. For instance, the Bupendo case is now moving in court, apart from what was happening previously. I read in the newspaper yesterday about police officers who were fined 100,000 for keeping, you know, an arrested person in a cell, in a dark cell. So we have progress. What we need to do is that we need to continuously document these facts and evidence. We need to ensure that due process is carried out. We need to ensure that we strengthen our legal system. We are still a young democracy compared to, you know, other countries. Okay. We need to ensure, as I finish, we need to ensure that we also avoid sensationalism and that we encourage, you know, reporting. Any small incident of human rights. And finally, we need, as a country, to engage in, you know, respectful dialogue on human rights. Because it's not only the government. You've seen the violence that, for instance, that we have seen in Homa Bay. Okay, point made. Yeah.
In the context of Homa Bay, in your submissions then, Wakili, does this answer who is behind the abductions, given the statement made by the president yesterday, and why they were abducted?
The president had an opportunity to respond globally to the issue. I think it is important that there is follow-up and there are studies and, you know, where accountability can be reached at, that there is accountability on specific officers and individuals. And I see, for instance, the finally we are having progress on the Bebupendo case. That is accountability. We are hoping that we will have progress on cases that were touching on last year's, demonstrations. And this is how we develop a human rights framework. This is how we develop a human rights culture, by ensuring that we start the dialogue, by ensuring that we follow up on commitments of public officials, the way the president made a commitment, by ensuring that we dialogue, by ensuring that we strengthen systems.
And there was an admission on his part that the government knew about the abductions.
The president, I'm not sure about that,
yes,
but I know that the president admitted that the fact that there were abductions in this country.
And the admission, then what happens? There must be answers and accountability, is it?
That is what now we need to follow up. And I think journalists have a role to play.
Yeah.
As human rights scholars, we have a right to, we have a duty to continuously document some of these things. Okay. And for me, this report is a very positive report.
Okay. And Wakili Sigei,
yes,
you happen to be another lawyer as well on the bench. What do you make of this? I mean, this gets back to the Grand Coalition government, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now President William Ruto. And it seems the common denominator is that we have been unable to address cases of gross human rights violations.
Thank you, Ayub. I wouldn't say we have been unable to address that aspect, because when you look at the headline, repressive regime is not a reflective of the story at page 3 and page 4. Because when we say repressive regime, in itself, it's an indictment of the fact that it hasn't progressed from when it started. When you go into the story itself, it digs into when it started. This is a 4.5-year reporting that happens. So the story tells us of where we were in 2020 and where we are in 2025.
2007.
Yes, but you look at the process is normally undertaken every 4.5 years.
Yeah, yes.
So in this case, they have actually touched on the regime currently and the previous regime. But then again, the story runs us through the issues which had been raised previously. Some, of course, we admit hasn't been fully implemented or haven't been enforced, particularly on certain aspects of human rights. But then I want to agree with my colleagues also that there has been improvement. When they list out on the issues that they've raised, particularly at page 4, where you actually took us to, what the civil society groups told the UN. This, I think, they should be around 13. When you look at the last 6, for instance, progress in housing rights, but affordable housing for poor lacking, forced evictions continue, energy supply unreliable and unaffordable for many, health budget speaks about free education, speaks about low awareness of CBC. I mean, these are the things that, Ayub, the government is attempting to do. We have seen lately what has been trending on the affordable housing programs within Nairobi and outside Nairobi, and the effort the government is trying to do. So however much we are saying there are certain areas on human rights which have not been fully protected, it is, on the other hand, something that the government has attempted to do. The president making reference to the fact that we would want to protect every human being, every human person. The attempts across almost all government agencies to ensure that anything that affects human rights, if it's about taking someone to court, it has happened. The unfortunate thing is that the aspect of the freedom of speech, the freedom of the media, always runs headlines sometimes like this. Otherwise, if I were to be the editor of such a newspaper, for instance, I wouldn't have been making it to scream as though it's literally dim, non-hopeful. You know, there is so much story behind the headline, which is negative, and the story which is telling us where Kenya was, where Kenya is now. The Attorney General indeed also was present in this particular session, and she gave her commitments in terms of what the government has done, in terms of the legislative agenda that has been put in place, in terms of the commitments that the government has previously done. Out of these 339 recommendations, the Attorney General indeed confirmed that we are in the process of and the commitment is there to implement 232. So it is true, accepted. Those have been pointed out. The government is keen on doing some. Of course, we are not as white as snow, as we say. We are all human beings.
Certainly,
similarly.
Certainly you appreciate that investigations must be concluded and evidence must be tightened up for the 60 lives, for example, lost in the aftermath of the demonstrations last year. More than 1,146 were abused by security agencies, according to the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, which we fund as taxpayers. Yes, Senator Onyonka.
You see, the issue that bothers me is that it's like this report in itself is conclusive. And my argument is this report is actually not conclusive. It raises the very basic fundamental issues which have been raised severally. And I have heard my brother being very positive about what the president has said. My argument is I expect the president to own up. Owning up is not saying, yes, that this thing actually happened. Everybody knows this thing happened. Right now, if we were to do a data analysis on the number of people who have been killed, the number of people who have disappeared, if you look at the cases of femicide that have been happening in our country, if you look at domestic violence, I mean, all these issues, whether we like it or not, are a reflection of what our country has become. And to me, what I actually expected the president to even do, for me to take him seriously, was for him to come and say, look, I'm even going to try and talk to the Chief Justice so that we can have special courts which are particularly going to be dealing with issues pertaining to these particular events. Number two, the events that took place last year, June, especially after the Gen Z's demonstrations and the abductions and the killings which took place, I would like to know exactly what the conclusion is. The parents of these children want to know. Kenyans want to know. It's not something that you're just going to lightly just comment. In fact, when I saw the president talk, I thought this was something that was generated by AI. Because he just said, you know, this thing, I'm aware that people have been being abducted, so I've said it has to stop and it will never happen again. What is he saying? To me, what is it that the president is actually saying? Is he saying that we are going to have proper investigations? Is he saying that the police officers who are killing people will be taken to court and they will face the law? Is he saying that justice will be served? So these are issues, even when I really feel comfortable that he has owned up, I really want him, and many Kenyans want him, to own up, make sure that we have restorative justice, make sure that the individuals whose rights have been pendo. And you see the complexity that we have now is that we're in this broad-based government. And the people, some of them who are being killed, were being killed when we are demonstrating against the KK government. So these complex issues, I feel that the leadership should sit down and agree that this matter is resolved once and for all, and it must never happen again.
Okay, and responsibility, as you had questioned on the part of the head of state, equally there's a responsibility on your part as a parliamentarian.
Yes.
When the TJRC report was presented before Parliament, you were then a member of the National Assembly.
It's true.
Why did Parliament then shelve that very pertinent report which had documented historical injustices in Kenya?
Thank you. As you come into this issue, I refer to you what I've said on this floor, this house, this station, over and over and over. The moment you have your parliament being overtaken, being controlled, being usurped by the executive, all right, I've said here very many times, Ayub, we have been in that parliament, and there are times when the very sensitive, critical issues need to be interrogated by members of the National Assembly, members of the Senate. Most of the time, those things are just pushed aside. We are as culpable and as responsible as everybody else who has never done anything to make sure that this issue doesn't occur again. We are as culpable, as responsible as the people who have been given the responsibility within the law to make sure that this country is governed well, and it hasn't been governed well. So I'm saying that yes, the report has come out, and yes, I can take the issue or anybody else and talk about how the presidency, whether it is President Ruto's presidency or President Uhuru's presidency, as Kenyans, we have refused to face those things that are what I call our dirty linen. We've always pushed them to the side. We've always kind of pushed them under the rug and moved on like nothing happened.
Okay.
My honest feeling is that we need to look at these issues now and conclusively sort them out with restorative justice to make sure that those who've been harmed, who have been killed, who've been violated are compensated, and then make sure that it is agreed within the Kenyan political elite and the Kenyan psyche that human rights abuses and violations must never be allowed to happen in our country again.
Council, I'll come to you after the break. And you belong to the alternative, so we'll take a look at and examine what the alternative will offer given the blanket failure that you said is on the part of those who are within the governance space in Kenya. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. When we get back from the break, we examine then what the alternative will offer for the Kenyan people and the voices of young Kenyans in effect to how they can shape the outcome of the election in 2027. Stay tuned.